Welcome to the deep dive. If you've ever wondered about, well, the deep connections between our brains, our health, and the stories we tell, then today's deep dive is definitely for you.
We're focusing on Oliver Wolf Sacks today, an extraordinary figure.
Absolutely. We're going to explore the life and the incredible legacy of Sacks.
He wasn't just a neurologist, was he? The New York Times had that amazing phrase for him.
Oh, yeah, the poet laureate of contemporary medicine.
Exactly, and also one of the great clinical writers of the 20th century. High praise indeed.
It really is. And that points to something unique he did. So our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack that. How did this British doctor, who was also a naturalist and a science historian, how did he manage to turn clinical observations, which can be quite dry,
into compelling narrative art that just grabbed millions of people?
Right. How did he make neurology so human?
Well, his whole identity really rests on building that bridge. He connected the arts and sciences by focusing on the individual story. His books, so many bestsellers, they were basically collections of these incredibly detailed case studies, people dealing with complex neurological issues. Sometimes he even wrote about himself.
And he didn't just list symptoms. He tried to show us their inner world, didn't he?
That was the key. He illuminated their experience.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Because his upbringing, it sounds like it was steeped in medicine from day one.
Oh, intensely so. Born in Cricklewood, London, youngest of 4 kids, Jewish family, and medicine was the family business.
His father was a doctor.
Samuel Sacks, yes. But his mother, Muriel Elsie Landau, she was a real trailblazer, one of the very first female surgeons in England.
Wow. So a very high-achieving scientific household.
Extremely. And that environment was, well, maybe clinically stimulating is the right word, but also intense. There's this one detail about his early exposure that's quite shocking, actually. His mother, trying to teach him anatomy, she would bring home deformed fetuses from her work.
Bring them home.
Yeah, and dissect them with young Oliver, right there, to teach him anatomy, dissection techniques.
That's an incredibly direct way to learn. Very, very clinical.
It really is. It suggests this environment where maybe objective science was prioritized over, the subjective, the emotional side of things.
Does that set up a conflict later? You mentioned he struggled with real medicine. Did this early sort of hyper-rational training play into that?
I think it absolutely does.
Yeah.
It creates this lifelong tension. On one hand, you have this incredible intellectual and medical family history. His cousin was Robert Aumann, the Nobel winner. Abba Eban, the statesman, was family too.
A powerhouse family.
Right. But on the other hand, the emotional groundwork seems fractured, especially by some early trauma.
Ah, yes. The evacuation during the war. That must have been terrifying.
It sounds like it was. December 1939, he's only 6 years old. He and his older brother, Michael, get evacuated from London because of the Blitz.
And sent off to boarding school.
In Midlands, yeah. But this wasn't some idyllic country school. The sources paint a grim picture.
So?
Meager rations of turnips and beetroot, constant hunger,
Ah.
and cruel punishments at the hands of a sadistic headmaster. Just awful stuff.
That kind of experience at age 6, that leaves a mark.
A deep one. He wrote about it years later in his first autobiography, Uncle Tungsten. The suffering, the deprivation. It seems that early separation and trauma, happening right when you're forming attachments, it's a key part of understanding Sacks. Maybe it fueled that later search for order, for control.
So when he gets back home at age 10, he doesn't just, relax.
No. He dives headfirst into something structured, something controllable. Chemistry. He becomes this incredibly focused amateur chemist.
Under his Uncle Dave's guidance, that's the Uncle Tungsten from the title.
That's the one. And this intense focus, this ability to just immerse himself completely, that's classic Sacks, isn't it?
We see it again and again.
Whether it's chemicals or later marine life or the human brain, he just dives deep. And that focus eventually took him to Oxford, Queen's College, in '51.
Started with preclinical studies, physiology, biology, got his BA in '56. Pure science, initially.
Right. But then comes this collision, the sort of detached science he'd learned, maybe echoing that early clinical exposure from his mother. It runs up against the messy reality of human suffering, his first big professional crisis.
What triggered it?
It was about meaning, really. He chose this research project on Jamaica ginger.
What's that?
It was this toxic substance, often abused, that caused terrible, irreversible nerve damage. Pretty grim stuff to study.
Sounds isolating.
It was. And he felt he had no guidance. He fell into this deep depression. He described it as a kind of quiet but agitated despair. He'd mastered the science, maybe, but he felt totally lost about the point of it all. Where was the human element?
So his parents and his tutor, I think,
Yeah,
they suggested something totally different.
radically different. Forget the lab. Go do hard physical work.
We were.
On a kibbutz in Israel, Ein Hashafet, summer of 1955.
And did it work?
Apparently, yes. He called the hard labor an anodyne, a painkiller for his sort of intellectual torture. He threw himself into it, lost something like 60 pounds. It was physical, it was communal. It seemed to heal something in him.
A physical cure for an intellectual problem.
You could say that.
Mhm.
And the insight he gained there was crucial for everything that followed. He realized his science background hadn't actually prepared him for.
For real medicine, as he called it.
Exactly. And what did he mean by that? It wasn't just about diagnosing illness.
It was about
Listening. Really listening to patients, trying to genuinely imagine their experience, their predicament, taking responsibility for them as whole people.
moving beyond the technical stuff.
Way beyond. He saw that medicine forces you to grapple with these much graver questions, ethical questions. But the quality of someone's life. Is this life under these conditions worth living? That realization, that empathy and narrative are just as vital as pathology. That's the seed of his whole unique approach.
And he carried that new perspective when he finished his medical degrees in '58.
He did. BM-BCH. Ready, perhaps, for a different kind of medicine.
Okay, so he finishes his training in the UK, but he doesn't stay. He lives for Canada.
Right on his 27th birthday, actually,
Yeah.
July 9th, 1960. Flew to Montreal. He had this brief idea about joining the Royal Canadian Air Force, doing medical research for them.
How did that go?
Not well. He kept making mistakes in the lab, destroying data, losing samples, things like that.
Oh, dear. Not ideal for a researcher.
Not at all. His supervisors basically said, look, maybe this isn't for you. Your heart doesn't see in it. Take some time, travel, think things over.
So that push actually sent him south.
Led him straight to the U.S., yeah.
Yeah.
Arrived in 1961, did his internship in San Francisco, then residency in neurology and neuropathology down at UCLA.
And California. This
Yeah.
seems to be where the quiet, shy Sachs embraces a completely different lifestyle, almost deliberately extreme.
It's such a paradoxical time in his life. He's living in Topanga Canyon, training seriously as a neurologist. But he's also diving into, as the sources put it, staggering bouts of pharmacological experimentation.
Recreational drugs.
Oh, yeah. He wrote about it quite openly later, especially in his book Hallucinations. He was really pushing boundaries, exploring consciousness chemically.
And physically, too, right? This wasn't just intellectual exploration. There was the Muscle Beach connection.
Fierce bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Not just casual workouts. He was a serious powerlifter.
Is it true he held a state record?
Apparently so. A California record for a full squat with 600 pounds on his shoulders.
600 pounds. That's incredible. It's hard to picture the thoughtful, gentle Dr. Sachs doing that.
It really is. The contrast is jarring. And add to that, he was a meter biker. Leather jacket, the whole deal. Racked up over 100,000 miles on his motorcycle.
Wow. So drugs, intense bodybuilding, motorcycling. What was driving all this? Was it a reaction against his reserved nature? A search for sensation?
Yeah, it feels like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe a need for physical control, for intense feeling to counterbalance that incredibly active inner world and his, profound shyness.
But then it just stops.
Abruptly, yes. He gave it all up. The drugs, the intense bodybuilding, the motorcycle, casual sex. He just cut it all off.
Why the sudden change?
It seems like he reached a limit. Maybe he exhausted that need for external extremes. This break, plus his move over to New York City, kind of cleared the decks. It made space for the next big shift, his professional epiphany.
And that epiphany came under the influence.
According to his own accounts, yeah. Amphetamine-assisted. And it was sparked by reading something quite obscure.
What was the reading?
The work of a 19th century doctor named Edward Living. Living wrote about migraine, but he did it in this incredibly detailed, narrative, empathetic way. He wasn't just listing symptoms. He was describing the patient's experience.
Ah, so Sachs saw a model there.
Exactly. He saw his calling. He decided he wanted to chronicle the oddities of the nervous system, but with that same narrative depth, that same focus on the person. He wanted to be the living of our time.
He found his mission, merging the clinical with the narrative.
That was it. Focusing on the person, not just the pathology. And interestingly, even after finding this path in America, he never quite became fully American.
He remained a resident alien.
For his entire life, yeah. He actually said he quite liked the term.
Resident alien. How did he feel about it?
He said, "It's how I feel. I'm a sympathetic, resident, sort of visiting alien." That perspective, maybe, being slightly outside, looking in,
Yeah.
perhaps that was crucial for maintaining that observational narrative stance.
An outsider's eye, even after decades.
So Sachs finds his calling, moves to New York, and his really career-defining work starts around 1966. He begins working at Beth Abraham Hospital.
That's in the Bronx, a chronic care place.
Exactly. And it was there he encountered this extraordinary group of patients, the ones who would form the basis of awakenings.
These were the survivors of the sleeping sickness from way back in the 1920s.
Encephalitis lethargica, yeah. People who had been essentially frozen, catatonic, locked inside themselves for decades, some since the 1920s, just unimaginable.
And then comes this new drug.
Levodopa, or L-Dopa, it was just becoming available. Sachs started giving it to these patients.
And the results were?
Initially, miraculous.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning. People who hadn't moved or spoken in 40 years suddenly woke up. They started moving, talking, engaging with the world again. It was the basis for his 1973 book, Awakenings.
But it wasn't just a simple miracle cure, was it?
No, that's the tragic complexity. The book, and Sachs himself, really grappled with this. The initial awakening was often followed by problems, severe side effects, like terrible A-tics or obsessive behaviors.
And sometimes they slipped back.
Sometimes they relapsed into their previous state, which must have been utterly heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It raised huge ethical questions for Sachs. Was it right? Was it kind to give them this glimpse of life, only for it to be potentially snatched away or distorted?
That human drama, the ethical weight, that's what made the book so powerful, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It resonated far beyond medicine. You had the big Hollywood movie in 1990 with Robin Williams and Robert De Niro.
Nominated, yeah.
But even before that, a British documentary in '74. And it kept inspiring adaptations, a ballet in 2010, an opera just a couple years ago by Tobias Picker.
It really captured the imagination.
It did. And it even helped lead to the founding of the Institute for Music and Neurologic Function, recognizing that maybe music and other non-drug therapies could also reach these patients. They honored Sachs twice for his work in that area.
So how did he develop this writing style, this ability to turn these complex cases into such compelling narratives?
He was very intentional about it. He saw himself reviving an older tradition. He talked about 19th century clinical anecdotes.
Not dry case reports.
Definitely not. He wanted detailed narrative histories. He even called his style novelistic. The goal wasn't just the diagnosis, it was capturing the person adapting to their situation, their unique world.
Were there specific influences that helped him hone that?
Two really stand out. First, the Russian neuropsychologist A.R. Luria.
Luria's work.
Yeah.
How did that connect?
Luria also wrote these incredibly detailed, almost biographical case histories. Sachs found them hugely inspiring. They actually started corresponding in 1973 and became close friends, well, pen pals, really.
Huh.
Luria validated Sachs's whole approach, the deep observation, the narrative focus.
And the second influence.
The poet W.H. Auden, they were friends. After Sachs published his first book, Migraine, in 1970, Auden gave him this piece of advice that Sachs said was crucial. Auden told him, be metaphorical, be mythical, be whatever you need.
Wow. That sounds like permission, almost, for a scientist to use literary tools.
Exactly. Permission to blend the factual with the philosophical, the clinical with the poetic, to use metaphor to explain the mind.
And he ran with that.
He really did. He started writing prolifically, not just for medical journals, but for places like The New Yorker, the New York Review of Books. He wanted to reach a general audience.
Which explains why he got that Lewis Thomas Prize for writing about science. He was bridging that gap.
Precisely. He made neuroscience accessible and deeply human.
Okay, so Auden basically tells him, go ahead, be literary. And Sachs definitely takes that to heart in the books that followed Awakenings. Let's talk about some of those key case studies, starting with maybe his most famous title.
The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, from 1985.
That title alone, it immediately tells you something profound and strange is going on.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It makes this complex condition, visual agnosia, instantly relatable almost, the inability to recognize objects or people, even though your vision itself is fine.
So the man in the title, Dr. P, I think he calls him, he literally couldn't recognize his wife's face.
Or common objects. He'd see the features, the lines, the colors, but his brain couldn't put them together into a meaningful whole. So yes, he might pat a fire hydrant thinking it was a child, or famously try to lift his wife's head off her shoulders thinking it was his hat.
Goodness, how did Sachs use that case? What was the deeper point?
For Sachs, it was a window into how our minds construct reality. What happens when that meaning-making software breaks down? It showed how fragile our sense of a coherent world actually is. We take perception for granted, but Dr. P's story showed the complex processes underneath.
And like Awakenings, it had this crossover appeal, right? There was an opera.
Yes, Michael Nyman adapted it into an opera in 1986. Again, these stories just tapped into something fundamental about human experience.
Okay, moving forward a bit to 1995. An Anthropologist on Mars. This feels like a shift, maybe, looking at neurodiversity.
I think that's exactly right. He was starting to explore difference, not just as deficit, but as
Right.
difference. The title piece is about Temple Grandin.
The autistic professor and animal behavior expert.
Right. And that essay won a Polk Award. In this book, Sachs really leaned into the idea that neurological conditions could be more than just impairments.
What did he say in the preface? Something about latent powers.
Yeah, he wrote that these conditions can play a paradoxical role by bringing out latent powers, developments, evolutions, forms of life that might never be seen in their absence. He was looking for the adaptations, the unique strengths.
So with Temple Grandin, what did he see?
He saw her description of feeling like an anthropologist on Mars, trying to understand neurotypical social cues, not just as a difficulty, but as a perspective. Her autistic mind, her visual thinking, gave her incredible insights into animal behavior and systems that maybe a normal mind would miss entirely. He celebrated her unique way of being.
Fascinating. Then in 1997, The Island of the Colorblind. This one seems different again, part travelogue, part science.
It really is a blend. The first part is about this small island community in Micronesia where a high percentage of people have achromatopsia.
Total colorblindness.
Total color blindness, plus often very poor vision and bright light. Sachs explores what their world is like, how they adapt. But the second part of the book, Psycat Island, that's where he makes this unexpected, serious scientific contribution.
That section focuses on Guam, right, and this devastating neurological disease.
Yes, the Chamorro people of Guam had this incredibly high rate of a disease they called lytico-bodig. It was this unique, awful mix of ALS, dementia, and Parkinson's symptoms. And scientists were baffled about the cause for decades.
So Sachs, the storyteller, becomes Sachs the detective?
Pretty much. He worked with other researchers, notably Paul Allen Cox, and they started piecing together an environmental explanation involving a toxin called BMAA.
From the cycad nut, a traditional food.
Exactly. But eating the nut directly wasn't the whole story. The key insight, the mechanism they proposed, was biomagnification.
Okay, let's break that down for listeners. Biomagnification.
Right. It means a toxin gets more and more concentrated as it moves up the food chain. So the cycad nut has some BMAA, but flying foxes' bats ate huge amounts of these nuts.
Ah, so the toxin builds up in the bat.
Massively. It gets concentrated in their tissues. And the Chamorro people traditionally ate these flying foxes.
So they were getting a huge, amplified dose of the toxin through the bats?
That was the hypothesis. A much higher dose than just from the nuts alone, potentially explaining the high rates of lytico-bodig. Sachs actually co-authored scientific papers on this. It shows his research went way beyond just collecting stories.
Really demonstrates his scientific depth alongside the narrative skill. Okay, one more key book, Hallucinations, from 2012.
This was important because it tackled a really stigmatized topic. People hear hallucinations and immediately think madness.
But Sachs argued it's much broader than that.
Much broader. He pointed out they're actually quite common, linked to things lots of people experience. Sensory deprivation, high fevers, intoxication, certain illnesses, even just migraines or falling asleep.
He wanted to normalize it in a way.
Definitely. And he highlighted lesser-known conditions like Charles Bonnet syndrome.
What's that one?
It affects people who've lost their sight, maybe through macular degeneration or glaucoma. They start having complex visual hallucinations, seeing patterns, faces, whole scenes, even though they know they're not real and they have no psychiatric illness. Sachs wanted to reassure people experiencing this that they weren't losing their minds.
And throughout all these books, the constant thread is Sachs himself often becomes the subject.
He had to, didn't he? His own life was full of neurological events. A leg to stand on back in '84. That was all about his recovery from a terrible mountaineering accident.
In Norway, where he badly injured his leg.
Yes, and he experienced this profound disconnection from his own limb, problems with his body image. It was a deeply personal exploration of neurology.
And later, his eyesight.
In The Mind's Eye from 2010, he wrote about losing depth perception, his stereoscopic vision, and then eventually losing sight in his right eye after treatment for eye cancer, a melanoma.
So being both the doctor observing and the patient experiencing, that must have shaped everything.
Profoundly. It gave his empathy such authenticity. It wasn't just theoretical. He knew what it felt like when the brain went awry. It validated his whole narrative approach from the inside out.
So we have this image of Sachs, the warm, curious, empathetic doctor in his writings, but the private man sounds like he was full of contradictions, very shy.
Deeply shy. He called it a disease, something that really hampered him his whole life, especially in social interactions.
And part of that shyness, maybe even a root cause, was linked to another neurological condition he had.
Yes, something he didn't fully realize the extent of until he was well into middle age. Prosopagnosia.
Face blindness.
Exactly. The inability to recognize familiar faces. Imagine trying to build relationships, network professionally, or even just navigate daily life when you might not recognize someone you met yesterday, or even a close colleague.
That's staggering. To be this incredible observer of human minds, yet be unable to recognize human faces, how did that affect him?
It must have been profoundly isolating. There's that famous story he tells about being in a waiting room, seeing this large bearded man, and almost bumping into him. He started to apologize, and then he realized the man was his own reflection in a mirror. He sometimes didn't recognize himself.
Wow. That puts his observational skills in a new light, doesn't it? Maybe writing detailed narratives about people was his way of recognizing them, of making sense of them without relying on facial cues.
That's a fascinating thought, turning people into stories as a compensation strategy. It certainly focuses you on other details, voice, mannerisms, the narrative itself.
Despite the shyness and the internal focus, he kept up those intense physical pursuits we talked about earlier.
Oh, yes. The drive for physical activity never really left him. The powerlifting might have faded, but he was a lifelong, passionate swimmer.
Known for swimming in open water near the Bronx.
Yeah, near City Island. Apparently swam in very cold water. Really pushed himself physically. It seems like it was always this necessary outlet for him, a way to balance the intense mental life.
But his personal life, his romantic life, that remained very hidden for a long, long time.
Extremely guarded. Sources say he was celibate for a huge stretch of his life, something like 35 years, from his mid-40s right up into his late 70s.
Why so private? Was it the shyness or something else?
Probably a combination of things.
Yeah.
The shyness, the prosopagnosia, making intimacy difficult, perhaps societal attitudes at the time. He didn't publicly discuss his homosexuality until he was 81.
That was in his 2015 autobiography, On the Move.
Yes. He finally addressed it openly then. It was quite a revelation for many readers who only knew the public persona.
And that late life openness coincided with him finding a partner.
It did. From 2009 until he died in 2015, he was in a committed relationship with the writer Bill Hayes.
Hayes wrote about their time together.
Yes, in a beautiful memoir called Insomniac City. It gives us a very touching glimpse into Sachs's later years, showing a side of him that was finally able to embrace that kind of deep personal connection after a lifetime of keeping it at bay.
So a kind of quiet resolution to that long struggle, and then his final illness came quite quickly.
Relatively, yes. In January 2015, they discovered that the ocular melanoma he'd had years before had metastasized to his liver.
And he knew the prognosis was terminal. How did he approach that?
With the same intellectual curiosity and, well, grace that he approached everything else, he wrote this incredibly moving op-ed for the New York Times, announcing his illness.
What was his message?
He said he wasn't focused on fear, but on living the time he had left as richly and productively as possible. He wanted to deepen friendships, say his farewells, write more, travel if he could, and just gain new understanding. It was remarkable.
A very Sachs approach to the end.
Completely. He died later that year, August 2015, at age 82.
He was so beloved by readers, by the general public, but you mentioned earlier not everyone in the medical or academic world was completely on board with his approach.
That's right. He definitely had his critics, particularly within the more traditional medical establishment.
What was their main issue?
Mostly his methodology. They felt his work was too idiosyncratic, too reliant on these individual, detailed stories, anecdotes, essentially rather than large-scale quantitative data from clinical trials.
So, not scientific enough in the modern sense.
That was the argument. That it was interesting literature, maybe, but not rigorous science.
And there was also criticism from the disability studies community. That sounds like a different angle.
It was, and in some ways a sharper critique of the narrative style itself. Some activists and academics felt that by focusing on these often quite extraordinary, even bizarre cases.
Like the man mistaking his wife for a hat.
Exactly. They argued he risked romanticizing or aestheticizing disability, turning patients into fascinating literary characters, maybe instead of focusing on the everyday struggles, the societal barriers, the systemic discrimination faced by people with disabilities.
There was that very pointed phrase someone used.
Tom Shakespeare. the British sociologist and disability rights activist. He called Sachs the man who mistook his patients for a literary career.
Oof, that's harsh. It implies exploitation.
It does. It perfectly captures that criticism that the narrative became more important than the patient or the broader issues. Sachs was aware of this, of course.
How did he respond?
He addressed it directly. He said he hoped his work always showed respect and appreciation, not any desire to just expose or exhibit for the thrill. He acknowledged it was a delicate business, writing about people's vulnerabilities. His stated aim was always empathy, understanding, illumination, not spectacle. He believed you needed the deep narrative to truly grasp the condition and the person's life.
And despite those debates, the institutional recognition he received was pretty significant. It suggests many people did see the value in his bridging role.
Oh, absolutely. He got the Lewis Thomas Prize we mentioned for science writing. Yeah. He was made a CBE, Commander of the Order of the British Empire, in 2008.
And that position at Columbia University.
Right. In 2007, they created the post of Columbia Artist specifically for him. That title itself speaks volumes, recognizing his unique role connecting arts and sciences, medicine, and literature.
You can't get much more establishment recognition than having a minor planet named after you.
Chuckles. True. 84928 Oliver Sacks, discovered back in 2003. That's quite something. His appeal really was astronomical, you could say.
And his legacy continues to unfold. Even after his death, he set up a foundation.
The Oliver Sacks Foundation, yeah. Dedicated to promoting the understanding of the brain through narrative nonfiction, continuing his mission. And his personal output was just immense. He was famous for being a prolific letter writer.
Handwritten letters only, right? No email.
Never used email. And a collection of those letters just came out in 2024. Gives even more insight into his thinking, his connections.
And then there's the archive. That sounds huge.
It is. The New York Public Library acquired it in 2024. We're talking 35,000 letters, thousands of photos, manuscripts, notebooks, journals. It's an incredible resource. Scholars will be mining that for decades.
So his work continues through the foundation, the archive, and posthumous books, too.
Yes, like River of Consciousness, in 2017, it was a collection of essays he'd already organized before he died. His commitment to exploring and writing was just relentless, right to the end.
So when you boil it all down, Sacks's career really was this unique fusion, wasn't it?
Completely. You had the clinical rigor. He was a respected neurologist, a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians, but you fused that with this incredible narrative empathy, the eye of a naturalist, the sensibility of a writer.
He basically created his own genre.
He did. And through it, he showed us something profound about the brain. That even when it's damaged or working differently, it's incredibly adaptable. It's always striving, always trying to make sense of the world, always plastic.
He showed us the humanity inside the neurology.
He captured what it felt like, what it meant to be conscious, to be a person facing these extraordinary neurological challenges. That farewell message he wrote.
Above all, I have been a sentient being.
A thinking animal on this beautiful planet, and that in itself has been an enormous privilege and adventure. He took his own adventure, his own observations, and shared the inner life of the mind in a way nobody else really had.
A man of contradictions, as his obituary noted. Candid yet guarded, intensely solitary, but also deeply connected to his patients' stories. And we've seen how his own experiences, the childhood trauma, the face blindness, the leg injury, weren't just background noise. They actively shaped his empathy, didn't they?
Absolutely. They gave him a unique lens. He wasn't just observing difference. He understood it from the inside, in a way.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, listening. Sacks demonstrated how understanding his own quirks, his own neurological landscape, gave him profound insight into others.
Right. So the question becomes, how might embracing your own internal landscape, your own unique ways of thinking, your strengths, maybe even your perceived weaknesses or quirks, how might that actually lead you to deeper, more original insights about the world around you?
Could your own different way of seeing things be a source of unique understanding, just as Sacks turned his challenges into a remarkable way of illuminating the human condition for all of us?
It's definitely something to reflect on.
A provocative thought indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the rich, complex life and work of Oliver Sacks.